everyone. Hope you are all doing well. Welcome to our online training series. My name is Jaime D'Alessandro, and I'm the supervising attorney of the Education Legal Rights Project at Legal Aid Service of Broward. Today, I will be providing a very brief update on special education law during COVID-19. To begin with, let's discuss FAPE. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, students with disabilities must receive a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, that includes special education and related services designed to meet the unique needs of each student. The primary vehicle for providing FAPE is an appropriately developed individual education plan, or IEP, that includes the student's levels, goals, aids, and services. A student can also have what's called a 504 plan. A 504 plan is a plan developed to ensure that a child who has a disability receives accommodations that will ensure their academic success and access to the learning environment. So, is a school required to continue to provide a FAPE to students with disabilities during a school closure caused by COVID-19? The answer is yes. If a school continues to provide educational opportunities to the general student population, which is what is occurring in Broward County, the school must ensure that students with disabilities also have equal access to the same opportunities, including a FAPE. Schools must ensure that, to the greatest extent possible, each student with a disability can be provided the special education and related services identified in the student's IEP or what's in their 504 plan. The key phrase here is to the greatest extent possible. Services. What services must a school provide during a closure due to COVID-19? Schools must determine whether a student may benefit from online or virtual instruction, instructional telephone calls, and other curriculum-based instructional activities to the extent available. So again, the key phrase is to the extent available. We must consider the health and safety of everyone and the physical limitations that result from that. So if a student does not receive services during a closure, the student's IEP team or 504 team must make an individualized determination whether and to what extent compensatory services may be needed to make up for any skills that may have been lost. So parents really need to be keeping track of what services are not being provided during this time in order to include that information when discussing whether or not compensatory services will need to be provided when returning to the physical school setting. Evaluations. What about evaluations? Parents need to continue to submit written requests for evaluations to schools if they suspect that their child has a disability. This has not changed during this time. Any required evaluations now may be held virtually to the extent practical. If there's any type of delay, the nature and extent of the delay and a plan to move as quickly as possible to prevent further delay should be documented. So if an evaluation cannot be completed virtually at this time for some reason, it must be done as soon as everyone has returned to the physical setting. So we have a few cases at this time where there has been a pause on evaluations because a certain component of that evaluation cannot be done virtually. But as soon as we return to the physical school setting, those will be completed. What about IEP meetings or 504 plan meetings at this time? Any IEP or 504 plan meetings may be held virtually to the extent practical. My unit attorneys and I have been participating in IEP and 504 plan meetings regularly since school has closed. So these meetings are being conducted on Microsoft Teams. Again, if there is any type of delay for some reason, the nature and extent of the delay, and a plan to move as quickly as possible to prevent further delay should be documented. But in Broward County, we haven't had any issues as far as this. We can continue to do the IEP meetings and 504 plan meetings through Microsoft Teams. But if you are having an issue, as soon as the school setting is back, as soon as that physical school setting is back, you need to request an IEP meeting or a 504 plan meeting as soon as possible. IEP and 504 teams continue to monitor and should be continuing to monitor each student's progress and determine what, if any, remediation may be needed upon return to the placement. Waiver authority under the CARES Act. Did U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos request waiver authority under the CARES Act for IDEA or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act? Fortunately, Secretary DeVos did not request waiver authority for any of the core tenets of the IDEA or Section 504, most notably a FAPE in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. This means that schools cannot waive their requirement in providing FAPE to students during this time. Where can I find updates from Broward County Public Schools? You can find all updates from Broward County Public Schools at the following website, news.browardschools.com. This website is updated regularly with important and helpful information regarding schools in Broward, as well as a number of resources to assist families during this time. I highly recommend that you regularly check this site. The information in this presentation comes from 3 main sources, and I've listed them on this slide for your review and reference. Please check them out. Finally, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Jaime D'Alessandro, and I'm with the Education Legal Rights Project at Legal Aid Broward. My phone number is 954-663-1531, and my email address is jdalessandro, so JDALESSANDRO @legalaid.org. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and continue to stay well. Thank you. The next presentation we will be viewing is from the Immigration Unit at Legal Aid. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrea Montavon-McKillip. I'm the supervising attorney for the Immigration Unit at Legal Aid Service of Broward County, and I'm going to be discussing the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on immigration. Things are changing very rapidly, so the information I'm going to provide is valid as of May 27, 2020. And then I'm going to provide some links where you can check for updated information in the future. So first, I'd like to discuss closures of the various immigration agencies during the pandemic, suspension of appointments and hearings and so forth, and when you can expect those appointments to resume. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so first I'm going to discuss U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. USCIS has suspended all in-person services since mid-March. They've announced that they will begin reopening June 4th unless public closures are extended, okay? What this means is that scheduled appointments such as fingerprint appointments, interviews, naturalization ceremonies, asylum interviews, these will all be automatically rescheduled. The only thing that an individual would need to reschedule would be an InfoPass appointment when you have already scheduled that appointment, you're going in to check on something. Everything else will be automatically rescheduled. Now, in-person services are available in very limited emergency situations. For example, if an immigrant needs what's called an added stamp, this is temporary, excuse me, temporary proof in a passport that someone is a resident. They would have to prove an emergent need to get an appointment at the office. An emergent need has been interpreted as meaning you need it for employment verification purposes, you need it for necessary international travel, or you're renewing a driver's license. However, that last one may hinge on Florida's rules on auto extending driver's licenses. Applications, all applications are still accepted by mail. And you can check the status of those applications online at the link I've listed there. You can also call the 800 number. You can set up an online account with USCIS to monitor your case. You can submit what's called an e-request if your case is outside processing times. And you can check on the processing times as well. These are all the links that are provided on the PowerPoint. Now, to check for reopening of offices on and after June 4th, there's a website for that, and that's also listed there. A few other things I want to mention for USCIS. If you have filed to renew a work permit, and you can't get in to do your fingerprints. The agency will reuse your previous fingerprints or previous biometrics captured during this time. And they're going to continue to do this through September 1st. However, there's a few things to keep in mind if you want them to be able to reuse your fingerprints. You have to make sure that your name, date of birth, and alien number is an exact match to whatever you previously submitted, or they're not going to be able to match them and reuse those biometrics. No naturalization ceremonies have been rescheduled yet. USCIS has said that they may start to do some smaller ceremonies. However, if you want a name change, you're going to have to wait for the courts to reopen because those ceremonies are done in the federal court. For asylum cases, you can mail nunc-pro-tunc applications. Those are applications that are outside of the one-year deadline, and supplemental filings to the Miami Asylum Office, and the address is listed there on your screen. You can also, attorneys can email the asylum office, but you must have a G-28 notice of appearance attached. USCIS has issued some guidelines for flexibility in accepting filings. So for responding to requests for evidence, notices of intent to deny, notices of intent to revoke, appeals of naturalization denials, notice of appeals, and motions to reopen, if the request, notice, or decision was issued between March 1st and July 1st, your response, your filing will be considered timely if it's received within 60 days after the due date. For those who are seeking extensions of non-immigrant status because they haven't been able to leave in a timely fashion, they should file an extension before their status expires. If it's late, then they can explain the extraordinary circumstances that were beyond their control. For visa waiver entrance, USCIS and CBP are giving 30 days for what's called satisfactory departure. And you can call USCIS for more information about this. USCIS is also flexible with signatures. Normally, they require original wet signatures, but during this time, they're allowing photocopies of wet signatures. There still has to be a wet signature existing somewhere, and you should hang on to that, but a photocopy can be submitted. Electronic signatures are not currently allowed. And finally, I just want to remind everybody to make sure that you are submitting changes of address if you move. This is a requirement under immigration law. You can do so online in most cases, and the website for that is also on the screen. Next, I want to quickly address check-ins with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. All check-ins are currently suspended. For reporting at Miramar, they will begin to reschedule, but they haven't provided a specific date for that yet. If you need to reschedule for some reason, once they begin check-ins again, the email for that and the phone number are provided on your screen. Stays of removal are still being accepted by mail, okay? You do not have to go into the Miramar office to file that. However, bond postings are being accepted in person at the Miramar office. ICE is requiring signed G28, so you still have to get a signed G28 from your client to provide to ICE. Next, I'd like to discuss what the immigration courts are doing. So all non-detained hearings have been suspended through June 12th. You can call to check for a new hearing date, check if a new hearing date has been scheduled at the 800 number on your screen. You can also check online at the EOIR portal at the website listed there. Remember that you will need the immigrant's A number, alien number, in order to check that. All filings are currently being accepted by email, although most courts are open for filings, only for filings. You can check the immigration court website page for the correct email address for your immigration court at the link listed on the screen. And this includes filings with the Board of Immigration Appeals, the BIA. Currently, the Miami and Chrome immigration courts are open for filings and detained hearings only. For individual hearings, attorneys should continue filing motions to continue. The next thing that I'd like to discuss is travel restrictions, border closings, and what's going on with the issuance of visas from U.S. consular posts abroad. So the president issued a proclamation on April 22nd that suspended certain types of immigration as of April 23rd. Now, this only affects immigrants who do not already have a green card, do not already have an immigrant visa, do not have a travel document such as an advanced parole or reentry permit. So it also doesn't affect healthcare workers and researchers. It doesn't affect spouses and children under 21 of U.S. citizens and members of the armed forces. This proclamation also doesn't restrict entry on non-immigrant visas, okay? However, given the travel situation, there may not be flights to enter on a non-immigrant visa. The northern and southern borders are closed to non-essential traffic, so to tourism and recreational traffic, until further notice. Most consular posts abroad are closed and not issuing visas. And the timeline for reopening for those will differ by country based on the situations in that country. So the best thing to do is to check with the U.S. Embassy or a consulate in the home country. Next, I'd like to briefly touch on benefits available to immigrants under the CARES Act and how this does or does not affect any public charge issues. So the stimulus checks, the recovery rebate, is available to those who have green cards and to most immigrants who have a work permit and valid Social Security number and who have been filing their taxes. Those who have an individual taxpayer identification number cannot get the credit. Also, if one spouse has a valid Social Security number and the other spouse has an ITIN, neither one can get the credit, unfortunately. For the child credit, the child must have a valid Social Security number. Now, the stimulus check is not going to affect anyone under the public charge rules. The unemployment compensation benefits that have been increased under the CARES Act. To be eligible for those, the immigrant must at least have a valid work permit. Now, unemployment compensation will also not be considered under public charge rules. So there is no reason for people to not seek these benefits. And finally, I just want to mention that testing and treatment for COVID-19 will also not be considered under public charge rules. Okay, the next topic I'd like to briefly discuss is immigrants who are currently in immigration detention. There is nationwide litigation going on about this, given the danger and risks to those in immigration detention centers. ICE is currently reporting that they have over, I believe it's 1,300 confirmed cases in ICE detention centers across the country. And that includes, I believe it's over 30 cases in South Florida detention centers. There is nationwide litigation out of California in a case called Freyhat versus ICE, that's F-R-A-I-H-A-T. And this specifically targets vulnerable population in immigration detention centers. So people who have chronic conditions, are older, have medical conditions that make them especially susceptible to becoming infected with and suffering severe injury or death from the illness. This is ongoing. There was a nationwide injunction issued in which the court said that ICE must consider people who fall within these vulnerable populations for release. It does not appear that ICE is following that, and in most cases, and that litigation is ongoing. Now, here in South Florida, Legal Aid Immigration has actually been involved in a separate class action lawsuit concerning the 3 main detention centers in South Florida. That's the Chrome Detention Center in Miami, the Broward Transitional Center, BTC, in Pompano Beach, and the Glades County Detention Center up in Moorhaven, Florida. A class action was filed because of the pretty terrible conditions in the detention centers and the risks it posed to everyone detained there. So far, the judge ordered ICE to try to reduce the population, and it has subsequently been reduced. However, ICE has been reducing the population by simply transferring people to other detention centers in other parts of the country instead of releasing them. So what's happening is they're just spreading the virus around and infecting more people. So this litigation is also ongoing, and actually there's a hearing this afternoon on class certification. Attorneys should be requesting parole release for their clients. There are lots of samples available, readily available online. Attorneys should also consider filing federal habeas petitions for detained clients, particularly who are older, who have medical conditions, who are vulnerable. And finally, I just want to remind everyone of how to refer cases to the immigration unit, which types of cases we accept, what our application process is, and so forth. First and foremost, we can only accept Broward residents, immigrants living in Broward County. We accept the following types of cases. Okay, we accept children who are in foster care, living with relatives, and unaccompanied minors, meaning they crossed into this country without a parent or legal guardian. We also accept cases of victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, and other violent crimes. And finally, we are accepting cases of detained immigrants who were residing in Broward County before their detention, and who are detained in the 3 South Florida detention centers, Chrome, BTC, and Glades. Now, our application process is for prospective clients to fill out our paper application. It's a simple 1-page, 2-sided form. It's available in English and Spanish. It's available on our website. The link is listed there. And that application, once it's completed, can be emailed to us, it can be faxed, or it can be mailed to us, Attention Immigration Unit. And I've listed the unit email and fax number there. So those are the cases we'd be happy to accept. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation. And I believe the tax unit is going to continue with their presentation.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Katherine Guerra, and I am the director of the tax clinic. And we're going to be talking today about some of the tax changes and relief that has been granted due to the COVID-19. I do want to say, and I want to point out some things that we are not going to be discussing, but if you do have questions or you want more information, you can always email me at kguerra, GUERRA@legalaid.org. Or you can call me at 954-736-2477. So today we're not going to be discussing anything that deals with employee retention credit. Also, we're not going to be talking about the cafeteria plans under 125 and the extension of them, and the Family First Act, the payroll and income tax credits. And the reason, once again, we're not going to be discussing these issues and some of the extensions of time with investments, capital gains, and stuff like that is because they usually are not something that our client base or low-income taxpayers deal with on a daily basis. So we'll start. I'm going to start chronologically, kind of what the IRS has done, and of course Congress with CARES Act. But the first thing that was done back in March 13 is the IRS issued notice 2020-18 that extended the time for the filing of 2019 tax returns from April 15, 2020 to July 15. This gives you, it's an automatic extension. Nothing needs to be filed. If you file a tax return between April 15 and July 15, and you pay your taxes before, before July 15, no interest or penalties will be accruing. Same thing if you file a tax return that where a refund is due to you during this time or this extension, then the IRS doesn't have to pay you any interest. If you want to have a little more time and extend the time to all the way to October 15, then you do have to file an extension, okay? But like I said, this was automatic. The second thing the IRS did is that they unveiled this People First initiative for COVID-19. And To sum it up, and I'm gonna go over some of the most important items, but to sum it up, everything was, any collection action was halted or suspended until July 15. Same thing, if you had a paid responsibility, you had to pay something to the IRS, it was extended or suspended until July 15. So the first thing I wanna discuss is installment agreements. So for those individuals and taxpayers that were unable to pay their taxes on just one payment, and they enter into a payment plan with the IRS, any payments between April 1st and July 15 are suspended and the agreement is not in default. This is great because usually if someone does not pay on time, the installment agreement gets canceled, and then to restart it, you're gonna have to pay a fee. But during this time, like I said, you can suspend the payments and not be in default. By law, the IRS cannot waive the interest, so interest will continue to accrue. Penalties have been also halted and suspended until July 15. Offering compromises. This is something that we do allow for taxpayers and our clients, and it's pretty much an agreement to settle the amount of liability for lesser amount. And anything that the IRS has requested or the offering compromise unit has requested from you can be suspended until July 15th. Also, if you have a payment obligation under an offering compromise agreement, no payments, you don't have to make any payments until July 15th. And once again, the offering compromise itself is not a default. Liens and levies. Please understand that the IRS usually issues letters and mails letters automatically. There's not someone that is looking at your account and issues a notice. So a lot of taxpayers, a lot of clients have been calling me because they have been receiving notice on intent to levy. In other words, that the IRS has the power to garnish any Social Security benefits, wages. They can go into your bank account, investment accounts. Anything and every collection action is suspended until July 15th. Once again, the notice is sent automatically, but the IRS won't take any action until July 15th or July 16th, which gives us a lot of time. We still have about a month and a half, so it gives us a lot of time to be able to really work with our clients and for taxpayers to kind of figure out what collection option is best for them. The passport certification has also been suspended, and this is for individuals who owe more than $53,000 in tax liability. The IRS is not going to be certifying them to the Department of State. And this is very important, especially for those taxpayers who are overseas and trying to get back home. I've had cases where the person has traveled overseas, and before the IRS was only, under the Department of State was only denying passports, but they started revoking the passports. So by the time they finished business and they were trying to get back to the United States, they said, they encountered this issue of their passport being revoked. So there's no certification or revocations or denials of passports at this time. And also the private debt collection agency has been suspended until July 15. A couple of years ago, and it's actually the third time in history that the IRS has used private collection agencies to try to collect from taxpayers tax liability. This, unfortunately, this private collection agencies, once they get the account, you only have two options, either to pay the full amount that is owed or enter into an installment agreement. As we know, many taxpayers are furloughed, they're unemployed, so none of the accounts are going to be sent into private collection agencies, which is a great time for us to, if for low-income tax, mid-income individuals to start really looking at their collection options and try to settle their accounts with the IRS. This initiative is great. It's extended the time for everything. It's giving a little bit of a breathing room for taxpayers. However, just like any agency, just like any employer, the IRS is also having the safety of their employees as the first thing. So a lot of people or their other employees are actually working from home. I think the IRS thought it was more ready to do a remote work than they are. So once everything started, they started realizing that the network couldn't handle the amount of people on it from home, and they had to start closing some units. So even though they created this incredible initiative and gave us a little bit of time to kind of figure out things, they also started closing some units. So even though we're ready to maybe submit something or to help, then we are coming across with that unit is closed, so you can still mail something, but once again, it's gonna be just sitting until the unit opens. Also, a lot of the IRS buildings, not only the tax office, which is the taxpayer assistance centers, where you can go in person if you have an appointment and talk to someone, the actual entire building and all personnel are not allowed to enter the building, especially here in Florida. So far, none of the IRS offices have opened. So if you've mailed something to the IRS and it happens to be in one of those offices, it's just pretty much going to take us some time for someone to be able to get that mail and process your request. Other things that have been a big issue, even like I said, even though we have this People First initiative, is income verification and ID verification. These usually are notices that are sent to taxpayers once they file their tax return, and once again, it's automatic. If the tax return gets caught in the IRS's filters, either because the income is not matching to what the employer said, or your income tax return doesn't really look the same as it has done in the past, you automatically are flagged, and then you send these notices to call, or usually it's to call or to go online to verify your income or your identity. The phone number was down, is open now, but it's taking people a very long time, taxpayers, and the worst thing is that the refund on that tax return gets frozen until you are able to verify your identity and the income. So, taxpayers are spending a lot of time on the phone because the IRS has limited phone personnel at this time. So, people who are really struggling, taxpayers who are struggling, are also getting their refunds being held by the IRS. We have been assisting a lot of these taxpayers, even though the tax professional line was also down until last week. They finally reopened. The CAF unit, which is what processed my power of attorneys to be able to speak on behalf of taxpayers, is closed still. And their fax, also the faxes on the IRS end, they're not working correctly. But the Taxpayer Advocate Service has been helping us, and we've been working together to help taxpayers, and we've been able to get some refunds for them. The last thing dealing with kind of the IRS working is that they did provide a economic impact payment group of people who are going to be answering the phone and answering questions. The phone number for that is the regular IRS number, which is 1-800-829-1040. Again, it's 1-800-829-1040, and it's selection 7. So you call, you can ask. I do tell the taxpayers to please try to call as early as you can. If not, you're gonna be on the phone for a very long time, and you're gonna get probably a courtesy hang up, which means you've been on the phone on hold for about an hour, and after being on hold for an hour or longer, the IRS says due to the number of calls, we cannot take your call this time, and they just hang up on you. So if you try to call somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock is the best window. You're still gonna have some waiting time, but you'll get through a little bit faster. So we're gonna be talking now about the CARES Act and everything that came along with it. Once again, I'm going to be directing all my information to low-income individuals. There's much more that is in this act that also provides for all taxpayers. So the first thing, of course, is the economic impact payment of the stimulus check. Through the IRS website, the irs.gov, you have 3 different tools that are being very useful. One of them is the non-filers. So those individuals who don't have a filing responsibility, as we know, the economic impact payment is being based either in 2019 tax return or 2018. Make sure that you meet the level of income, how you file your tax return, whether you filed single, married filing jointly, head of household. But those individuals that don't earn enough to file a tax return, or who are homeless and haven't worked, they are also eligible for this, this payment, a stimulus check, through the non-filer process. And it's a very simple process. You put your information. Once again, we have been helping a lot of these individuals to fill out the forms and the information that is needed to get their stimulus check. The one problem that we've been facing, especially for the low-income individuals who are maybe homeless or don't have a computer at home or don't have Wi-Fi or they don't have a smartphone, is the process requires you to have verify your email. So maybe they do have an email address, but they don't remember the password. They don't know how to access their email. So that becomes a little bit of an issue. We've been able to work with them to kind of pass this obstacle. And also then the IRS has to send a text message. So if just phones that don't have, and most phones now, most phone services have text messaging services, but if you don't have, then that becomes also an issue. At this time, the IRS is not allowing any paper filing for these non-filers. So the online tool is the only one available. Also, the other tool that is very useful is Get My Payment through the IRS website. It's right on the homepage of the IRS website, Get My Payment. And it's a way of you tracking down the status of the payment. You put your social security, your date of birth, the last known address to the IRS, so the last address that you use on your tax return, the zip code, and then you should be able to access. By this time, most people should receive their stimulus check. I know some individuals who are, like I said, the non-filers that were still going through the process, people that filed their tax returns 2018 or 2019 a little bit later in the filing season, maybe still kind of struggling, and some of the Social Security recipients, which I'll get to a little bit later. Also, the last tool in the IRS website is the Get Coronavirus Tax Relief. It's very useful. Once again, just like the immigration unit, all the information that I'm provided is up to date on today, May 27, 2020. The IRS has continued to provide guidance and continue. So this is Get Coronavirus Tax Relief on the, once again, homepage of the IRS website, provides you the most updated information. I don't want to go over a lot of the eligibility for the stimulus checks, just because, like I said, most people have received them and there's so much information that has been put out there. I think my concern right now is those individuals who are calling me saying they haven't received their stimulus check yet, or they did not receive the amount they were eligible for, or they received more than they think they're eligible for. So these are the topics I really want to concentrate. The first one is those people, those individuals or taxpayers who haven't received the stimulus check and their Social Security recipients. So they, the IRS did issue and the Treasury issue some guidance saying that if you are a Social Security recipient or a VA benefit recipient or railroad retirement recipient, that you will be getting the stimulus check the same way you get your monthly benefits, whether it's a direct deposit, a check, or in the Direct Express Social Security card. It's taking them a little bit longer. I've noticed for those who get their monthly benefits with a check, the direct card. The IRS did say that by the beginning of June, they're going to pretty much everybody in this group of people have their stimulus check. So continue to check the Get My Payment. If you get there, if you go there and it's saying that it's pending or there's not enough information, that doesn't mean that you're not eligible. They just haven't gotten to you. So don't worry, just be a little patient. They're trying their best to go ahead and get everybody. The problem becomes when you do go to that Get My Payment and you see that it was sent out to you and it's been a few weeks, and then you get Notice 1444. Notice 1444 by law is required. It requires the IRS to send this notice within 15 days of sending you the stimulus check. So if you get this letter as talking about the stimulus check is signed by President Trump, and you go to Get My Payment and you see that it was issued and you haven't received it, at that point you need to start an ID or identity theft process with the IRS, and this is done by filling out form 14039. And right on the top of that form, the IRS wants you to put the stimulus check or economic impact payment, something that lets the IRS know that the reason that you're filing this form is due to the stimulus check. At that point, that the IRS would track down the payment that was sent to you or on your behalf. Once they find it and see that it wasn't either the check was in cash or was sent to the wrong bank account, whatever it may be, and that you really didn't receive the payment, then they'll go ahead and start issuing another one. The second topic of the stimulus check that I want to talk about are those individuals who maybe, in 2019, they filed jointly with a child, but they only got, let's say, $1,200, which is something for someone who files a single tax return or married filing separately with no dependents. I do want to remind you that the stimulus check or the economic impact payment is an advance credit of your 2020 taxes. And by saying advance, I don't mean that if, let's say, on average, you usually file your tax return and you get $4,000 worth of refund because, you have a lot of withholding, you have kids, you have maybe you itemize your deductions, and you usually on average get $4,000. The IRS is not sending you an advance on that refund. If you're still eligible for when you file your 2020 tax return for the child tax credit and earned income credit, your withholding, all that refund will be sent to you. This is a new credit that was created, and instead of waiting for you to file your 2020 tax return, they're sending it to you ahead of time. So for those individuals that haven't received the entire amount, the IRS right now is not going to issue another stimulus check to kind of compensate. What you have to do is wait until you file your 2020 tax return. There's going to be a line that is going to be created, say how much money you received. Let's say you're married filing jointly, and you have one dependent, but you only got $1,200. You put $1,200, and the IRS with your refund will add on the $1,200 for your spouse and the $500 for your child. So that's something that it needs to be reconsolidated when you go ahead and file your 2020 tax return. Another thing is I've gotten a lot of calls. The IRS has been making a lot of mistakes. They've been sending stimulus checks to individuals who have passed, for individuals that maybe are not eligible. If you got the stimulus check, if you got it for a family member who has passed away, they have said that you should return it. Send a letter, put void, send it back to the IRS. But one thing the IRS has said that is if they overpaid you or they just got it wrong, you're not gonna have to pay any difference. If you didn't get enough, you will be you'll be getting the difference. But if you got too much, you're not gonna have to repay the difference. So that's kind of how it's working at this time. I think that's it. Dependents, I do want to say, because I've gotten a few calls of people saying, look, my neighbor who has a child that's the same age as mine got the $500 additional for them, and our kids are both 17 or something like that. At that point, once again, your neighbor, the IRS made a mistake, got $500 for them, but the dependents that are eligible for the additional $500 is any dependent that is under 17. So 17 and over, if they're your dependent, you're not getting any money from them, even if they filed their own tax return and did not claim themselves as a dependent. So a lot of calls that I'm also getting is individuals who are Social Security recipients who are waiting for the stimulus check. They haven't received it. Once I start asking a couple of questions, then I realize it's because they are being claimed by a child or by somebody else as a dependent on their tax return. So just because they don't file their own return, just because they are, Social Security recipients, if they are being claimed by somebody else, that they're no longer eligible to get their stimulus check. Under the CARES Act, also, Congress passed a retirement account portion of it, which allows you to withdraw up to $100,000 of a Corona distribution without having to pay the 10%. As you may know, if you take out money early from your retirement account without costs, without reaching the age, then you not only have to pay taxes on it unless it's a Roth, and you also have the 10% penalty. So you're able to take up to $100,000 and not be subject to the 10%. You are always subject to the federal income tax, but you don't have to report it all in your 2020 income. So let's say I take out a withholding of $100,000. usually I will have to add on those $100,000 to my income when I file 2020. But now what the Congress said is they're allowing me to do it within 3 years. So divide the amount that I ask for distribution and pay taxes on a 3-year basis rather than just in 1 year. And once again, the 10% penalty is waived. The corona distribution would be if you were furloughed, if you were diagnosed, if someone that a close family member who you care for was diagnosed, and therefore your finances changed because of this unemployment. Someone who's been working who hasn't had any changes in their finances cannot take this money just to, let's say, to make a new investment or anything like that. Then you will be subject to the 10%. Also, with the retirement accounts, the Congress has allowed for you to take out $100,000. Usually you can always take a loan out from your retirement account up to $50,000. They extend it to $100,000. And as long as you pay it back within 6 years, then of course you don't have to pay the taxes or the 10% penalty. The last thing with the CARES Act is the charitable contributions. They created 2 different ones, or they extended some of the charitable contributions that you can't use. The first one is above the line. In other words, before you calculate what your adjusted gross income is, you can go ahead and take up to $300 of cash distributions to a nonprofit. And there's some limitations as to which kind of nonprofit organization and service organization you're able to make the contribution and still be eligible. Also, if you itemize, this is one of the biggest, I think, reliefs that they've granted, is that if you itemize, you can reduce your adjusted gross income up to 100% if you for charitable contributions. So let's say my AGI is $100,000 and I contributed $100,000 in charitables during this year for 2 different organizations. I can, my taxable income at that year will be 0. So you can offset your entire income with charitable contributions. And if you, let's say, once again, with the example, rather, let's say I made $100,000, but I made $150,000 worth of contributions, I take $100,000 this year and I can carry forward for 5 years the rest, the remaining of my contributions to, once again, drop my AGI. And the last thing I want to talk about is the tax court. All tax court trials have been suspended until June 30th. Here in Miami, we didn't have anything scheduled during this time. So we're hoping that when November, December, when trial sessions come back here in Miami, we can go back. We do have some cases in the docket for that time. The most important thing is, as you know, the 90-day letter, which gives you that's the time frame that you have to file a tax court petition. Because the tax court has been closed, you are allowed, so anything, if the 90 letter was between April 1st and July 15th, your due date is July 16th, the next day when court opens. So make sure that you get your tax court filing, if that's the route that you want to go to deal with your tax controversy with the IRS. Other than that, once again, I want to provide my information if you have any questions. We are taking cases, normal cases. We also, the program offers for LITC. Usually we're not allowed to file taxes for individuals, but they're allowed us to file taxes for 2019 tax season if the person is waiting for the stimulus check. So my information is, my name is Katherine Guerra, Kathy Guerra, and the email is Guerra, Guerra, @legalaid.org, and my phone number is 954-736-2477. Thank you, and this concludes our presentation for today.